Hello, dear YouTubers. Welcome to another episode of Real Turkey channel. I'm your host, Atilla Yesilada, reporting from Istanbul and talking to our resident expert, Ms. Guldem Atabay, who is in Izmir, a lovely Aegean city. Tonight, we're doing politics, very important developments. Hi, Guldem.
Hi, Attila.
Today, Mr. Erdogan roared again. He said, unless a safe zone to his liking in northeast Syria is agreed upon within 2 weeks, he will try other options, by which he means probably a military operation in Syria. Now, on the other hand, I read the news, and the Turkish military and the Pentagon seem to be cooperating very well. They are patrolling the proposed safe zone every day by land and by chopper. So what's going on here? What suddenly angered Mr. Erdogan, or are we going to have a safe zone?
Well, the problem remains as it was before. I think it's U.S. relations with the Kurdish Syrian Kurds over there. So patrolling the region in the northeastern Syria is not a problem, because that was already done before during the Iraq tension and many times before. But the presence of SDF over there, especially with the U.S. military's cooperation with the Kurdish militia, what the Turks are calling, which they see as the extension of the terrorist PKK in Turkey, is the main problem that is blocking further progress in U.S.-Turkey relations with regards to the safe zone area that Turkey is planning to get. And in the meantime, as we know, Russia, Syria, Iran, they're all against the U.S. presence in the region. So I think the future of the Kurdish region is the main problem there, and it's an important blockage that will be preventing further fruitful progress in a safe zone agreement, I guess.
Now, if you ask my opinion, Mr. Erdogan's new idea of resettling up to 2 million Syrian refugees in that particular safe zone is a no-go for Kurds, because then the Arabs will have majority.
Yeah, they will be losing their control.
Yeah. So if there is no safe zone, do you really think, or do you get the impression that Erdogan is serious? That was the question.
Can you repeat the question, because the line broke, kind of?
Okay.
The last sentence, please.
Yeah. Now, assuming there won't be a safe zone, according to the ideals described by President Erdogan, is he serious about a military incursion? And how does the Trump meeting next week play into all of these?
Well, I hope he's not really serious about the military incursion. I think that is being used as a leverage in between all this trade-off between Turkey, US, Turkey, Russia, Turkey, Iran, even Turkey-Syria relations. So I think that was an important threat ahead of the UN talks in the US. And I think it follows up what there was this meeting, another follow-up meeting of what we call the Astana spirit, let's say. Last year it was in Sochi, so we know that Turkey has been patrolling the Idlib region since the Sochi agreement, and now it's the Ankara meeting happened. That was the fifth of such round of talks, and what we saw there was Turkey was aligning even closer with Russia. And maybe what I read from the press throughout the week is that if there's a no safe zone within the Turkey-US relations, there could be a safe corridor or a corridor that would be clean from all the forces if Turkey and Russia agree on the future of Syria.
Yeah.
Yes, kind of thing like that. If Turkey agrees to progress in its relations with the Assad regime in the future, what I think Turkey will have to in some format, I think the Turkey might be getting such corridor, not from the US side, but from the Russian side. So I think that is being used as a leverage in this continuous negotiations between these different parts of the world, parts of the countries. So I hope there will be no military incursion, and that does not really look likely, because it needs support from the U.S. military and an agreement on the future of the Kurds, which does not seem to be existing at the moment.
Let's return to Idlib,
Yeah.
where roughly 500,000 refugees are huddled right at the Turkish border. I mean, right, at the border gates. And Assad, as far as I understand, really doesn't care much for these people. He doesn't care if they flood Turkey. But Erdogan cares, because one reason why he lost municipal elections is that Turks don't want more Syrian refugees. We cannot afford more Syrian refugees. Do you have any idea whether Rouhani and Putin have offered Erdogan a way out from this dilemma if he, starts talking to Assad?
Well, as you said, according to official figures, there are 3.6 million Syrians living in Turkey right now, and additional 1.5 or 2 million further refugees would really put political pressure on our President Erdogan. So I think it's trying to find a way out of from trying to balance that supporting these, helping these people, and at the same time blocking their entrance into Turkey for the future of stability of the region. But as you said, the Kurds are dominating other parts of Idlib, and the Syrian army, the military on Assad's army, the official regime's army is marching towards Idlib despite the agreement that was reached, the ceasefire agreement that was reached back in late August. And as we read, the Russian warplanes are supporting the Assad's army's movement towards Idlib. So at some point, I think Erdogan will have to give up its patrolling points around Idlib region, or in that observation points.
Outposts.
So again, this is a trade-off, and I think what Erdogan would like to do is that place these people into these safe zones, negotiate with the Russian government at the moment, but at some point he will have to address directly to the Bashar Assad himself. And as they have agreed on the future of a constitution for Syria to end this 8-year terrible war, I think he will have to contact him. And I think what he will get in return is that keeping these people in that new safe corridor to be planned or to be designed with Russians, Iranians and Turkeys and Assad's presence in that region, but at the cost of losing the control of Idlib, I guess.
Well, yeah, it looks to me Erdogan is stuck either way. Either he's going to completely lose United States, or he's going to lose Russia and Iran, and we'll have to do something in Idlib. Can I say safely, without putting words in your mouth, that political risks are rising from Syria as far as Turkey goes?
I think yes, because abandoning or not moving forward with the safe zone agreement with the US and these kind of threats, that military incursion threats, can bring this S-400 purchases, F-35 warplanes purchase, the collapse of that agreement back on the agenda. And these economic sanctions could suddenly emerge within the first half of 2020. So I think these are the most important political instability points that can emerge suddenly for Turkey, and instability in the region. Further Syrian refugee flow could be the second round, the second tier political risks that Turkey could face in the coming year ahead, I guess.
Okay, we're going to do EU relations, but let me just skip to domestic politics, because we have seen some polls by ORC, by Optimar, and by AKAM, Eurasian Survey Center. And I think in all three of them, both Babacan and Davutoglu seem to be doing okay. These are Mr. Erdogan's internal rivals. To me, they're doing well, not necessarily because they have done anything out of the ordinary, but because Turkey's economic slump and Mr. Erdogan's confused policy movements are pushing voters towards Babacan and Davutoglu. What is your sense? I mean, is Erdogan really worried about these rivals? Do you see the potential for AKP congressmen and women resigning and joining the new parties if the Syrian situation gets worse?
Well, I think Erdogan is truly threatened by this opposition movement from within the AKP that he is tightly controlling in the past couple of years. And these figures, both Davutoglu, he was Turkey's prime minister, although he was seen as Erdogan's man during his term, his uproar, his speeches, his coming up against Erdogan and directing at the problems in the Turkish economy, in Turkish social backgrounds, that starts with the lessons or the degraded freedom of speech, freedom of expression in Turkey and everything, the Kurdish problem and everything, and pointing at these problems, I think is an important threat for Erdogan because people have started talking. But on the other hand, I think that's Davutoglu's threats has its own limitations because he's not a politician who's known to be able to attract wider
Following.
society, wider parts of the society, from the Kurds, from the opposition to the HP. But when it comes to Mr. Babacan, I think it's a different case because the main problem is the, as you said, economic slump in Turkey. He's remembered as a very successful economy minister, which he basically gained by continuing with the IMF program during the early years of the AKP's administration. And nowadays...
Another one might be needed.
Now another one might be needed, exactly. And he left his position when he had a hidden quarrel with Erdogan during for the future of during discussions of the need of a fiscal rule back a couple of years ago. So if we are to come to today that we're seeing the fiscal balance or the fiscal quality of Turkey's accounts are falling apart, we can just understand how important of imposing a fiscal rule as imposed by Babacan back a couple of years ago. So his contacts with the Western communities, with Western governments, investors especially, his name as known within the wider parts of the Turkish society, his contacts through other opposition parties, perhaps with the Kurds, because he has been talking about the need to improve freedom of expression in Turkey, to gather all different groups together to have a better future for Turkey. His vision on the economy, I think he's more of a serious threat for Erdogan. So I think he might be able to. He's already attracting media attention, and every time he speaks, every time he gives an interview, it's almost in every newspaper that are not dominated by the AKP government. So I think Erdogan is seriously threatened by these such movements, and in the coming months, as they establish their own parties, I think things will get get more excited for Turkey's political background.
Exciting for us, uncertain and risky
for investors,
those who have money in Turkey.
Exactly.
Yesterday, the main opposition leader, Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu, said the government will be forced to call early elections, and government spokesperson said, no, we have no intentions like that. What is your sense? You said earlier in our earlier broadcast that early elections is a possibility. Have you changed your view, or are you still there?
I haven't changed my view. I'm looking at the macro figures. They're cutting the policy rates aggressively to jumpstart economic growth. they're spending like crazy on the fiscal side. They're using uncharted territorial waters, let's say, like using the central bank reserve accounts to spend for the treasury. They are going to exceed the budget deficit limits within the coming few months by the end of the year, with a quite margin. And these all signal that they are getting ready, or they are getting. They don't want to get caught unready if they are forced to have early elections because of this rising opposition force within Turkey. It's not only Babacan and Davutoglu. The elected mayors of Istanbul and Ankara are getting serious attention from the Turkish public each time they speak, each time they act on something that against what AKP used to do in the past 20 years with the Istanbul administration. So I think opposition is kind of getting into action, and if they are to join forces, which they have done back in the local elections this year, I think the possibility of early elections is even rising.
Which might be good news for Turkey, but again, it's bad news for FDI and investors. Let's close this episode with some good news for a change.
Yeah.
I was surprised by President Erdogan issuing a decree today ordering his own ministers to expedite preparations for EU visa waivers. What the hell? I mean,
why now? Right, exactly.
Why not
I
do it himself? What is stopping? I think the main sticking point is obviously the journalists who are in prison because of what Europe considers political crimes or thought crimes, and people like Osman Kavala, who are actually charitable people with connections. And the most important point is that Turkey refuses to amend the anti-terror bill, which essentially doesn't make a distinction between a sympathizer, an advocate, and actually a person with a gun in her hand. Is Erdogan serious about visa waivers in the sense EU has described the conditions? Are we going to see some moderation in the political environment in the crackdown against any kind of opposition in Turkey?
Well, what I thought today when I saw the news was that this cannot be possible because amending the anti-terror law and improving freedom of expression, freedom of speech in Turkey along the lines that the European Union standards are is not going to be serving our president, because we know that he favors the opposite. He uses the opposites as he gains control for his presence. But what I thought was that was another sign of early elections, because because
to hammer everything it's like a nail, yes.
Yeah, because out of this 70-something items, the 6 of them were left, and they've been like up in the air since back in 2013. And the government hasn't progressed on the freedom of. They actually regressed on the freedom of speech for Turkey, and they have threatened these European Union counterparts so many times during these last couple of years election cycles. But each time they were like on a rally for an election campaign, they used that we are going to be bringing visa waivers, visa liberation for our people, for our businessmen. Just right after the election. So I think it's another tool to be used on a very possible looking early elections down sometime in 2022.
Okay, wow.
I guess, because it doesn't look realistic to me.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
Yeah.
Well, dear YouTubers, I recommend Guldem take more antidepressants or double dose before we present something.
How much more can one tolerate?
Guldem, thank you very much
You're
for
welcome.
contributing from Izmir, and you have watched another episode of Real Turkey Channel. We do Turkey right. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.